Black Lives Matter chapters celebrate the terrorist attack in Israel. They revel in what happened at the music festival to the point where they've got an image that they have posted on their social media of the hang glider coming in. And we all know what that means. Just truly horrific. And yet Black Lives Matter is celebrating this. What is going on? For any of you following this channel, this is not shocking, but let's go. Let's get into it. Here we go. Black Lives Matter chapters across the country are celebrating the terrorist attacks that have claimed hundreds of innocent lives in Israel. And when we say chapters, we are talking Los Angeles, we are talking Chicago, we are talking Louisville, just a whole bunch of them. And as I am recording this, I am seeing the posts being taken down. You know, when you hit a hyperlink and it's no longer there, that's what we're seeing, because there's a little bit of a backlash on this. I mean, this is one of those polarizing type deals. And you might say, well, why is Black Lives supporting this? Why is Black Lives Matter supporting this? Because they are. That's what they've been in alignment with Palestine for years. It's one of their fundamental tenets, right? Over the weekend, Hamas launched a brutal assault on Israeli civilians that included the beheading of babies, the mass R-word of women, and the burning of men, women, and children. I mean, the whole thing is just horrific. Horrific. This was a horrific event. I've been reading the news for years and years and years. I read a lot of Middle East stuff that was going on when I was in high school in the 80s and then early 90s. I mean, you had some crazy stuff. I don't remember specifics like this that are just, I mean, like, what? We're doing what? Crazy stuff. One of the most gruesome scenes took place at the Nova Music Festival, where over 260 attendees were killed by assailants, some of whom arrived in vans and some of whom came on motorized paragliders. Survivors reported that many of the women were before being murdered. I mean, just some terrible, terrible stuff. Oh, yeah. And yet you've got these Black Lives Matter, entities that are saying, where we stand. I mean, here's an example of what we're talking about. And this is one of the few images I could find. This was in a Fox video. These images have basically been taken down as far as I can tell. You got a hang glider with Palestinian flag and I stand with Palestine. Black Lives Matter Chicago saying, that is all, that is it. All right. So if you're standing with Palestine, I think you can stand with Palestine, on the side, but you are basically, condoning the actions that happened at this rave festival. That was brutal. It's a trance music festival. And you've got that going on. It's, goes all night and it's the early morning. All of a sudden you got hang gliders coming in. I mean, that is some real life, just horror movie type stuff. That's Wolverines, right? Remember when it used to be Russia and the Russian, parachute started dropping down and kids are looking out the window from their school. Like, what's going on there? Oh yeah, it's the Russians coming. It was a Russian invasion. That is exactly what those kids experienced at this music festival. But they didn't get detained. If you haven't followed that story about the hang gliders coming in, I mean, horrible. So, just terrible. The massacre was commemorated by Black Lives Matter in Chicago, which posted a graphic of a paraglider, Palestinian flag, and the caption, I stand with Palestine on X Tuesday. There we go. Picture not found. Yeah, that stuff's been disappearing because this is not a good look. On Instagram, Black Lives Matter Los Angeles also joined in the celebration, insisting that Hamas resistance must not be condemned, but understood as a desperate act of self-defense. Hang gliding in and assaulting women and then murdering them? That's a straight up terrorist attack. And I know there's a ton of subtleties to this storyline. I get that. But it's kind of like if you in any way have any humanity in you at all, stuff that happened here, that's a hard no-go. You just draw a line and say, beheading babies? I mean, yeah. Parading, women that are just barely partially clothed. A lot of the news stories is saying completely nude or naked, but that is not the case. But poor girl was, she's a tattoo artist, and she's, she'd been murdered, and they're, parading her around in the back of a truck. I mean, we're gonna condone that as saying that it was self-defense. I don't think so. We too misunderstand what we too understand. This is Black Lives Matter means to be surveilled, dehumanized, property seized, families separated, our people criminalized and slaughtered with impunity, locked up in droves, and when we resist, they call us terrorists, continued the chapter. Well, I think people called Black Lives Matter terrorists when you went out and basically, looted and let towns on fire and, went through all of that. My first interaction with Black Lives Matter was at CHOP, which is at Chaz over in Seattle, that ended with the murder of 2 young Black lives. That was my kind of introduction. So I'm kind of going, all right, this is supposed to be supporting Black Lives Matter, and yet this is the end result. What do we got going on here? I mean, it was just, it did not go well. So here's Black Lives Matter Los Angeles. They are Black Lives Matter grassroots statement in solidarity with the Palestinian people. Okay. All right. I mean, but that's what we've got going on. So I think a lot of folks that haven't done a ton of research on the Black Lives Matter movement, you've got the Black Lives Matter movement, and then you've got grassroots, and then you've got global, all these different entities. And I think people, that didn't really do their homework are just thinking that Black Lives Matter, it's the slogan. And yeah, of course, all lives matter as well. Everybody matters, right? But Black lives, sure. Black lives matter. You betcha. But then when you see this kind of stuff, and then you're like, oh, yeah. Well, I mean, they have supported Palestine in the past. And now very openly, with the hang glider, they're basically stating, yeah, we're on board with this. We're okay with this. And with the number of posts that I have seen taken down, I am guessing that there's been some real pushback on their support of the atrocities that just took place and are taking place right now. Because there's how many hostages that have been taken? Yeah, those are not being treated well. The women, the children, the elderly, the men. Black Lives Matter Washington, D.C., meanwhile, remained silent on the atrocities committed against Jewish civilians before retweeting posts insisting that the Israeli response to the attack will be a continuation of war against Palestinians rather than target it as Hamas, and that Free Palestine, with or without anyone trying to make indefensible genocidal oppression a complicated both sides matter. They're talking about the history of, Palestine and Israel. And yes, there's a long history there, right? And I am no expert on that whatsoever. But what you had here is you had a terrorist group invade Israel and just commit some absolute crazy, crazy atrocities. And it's coming out. It's coming to light. And meanwhile, you got Black Lives Matter with, with the logo of the hang glider. And you're like, we know what that is because we've seen the video. We know what the end result of that is. Israeli airstrikes began to pound Gaza this week in response to the violence. Palestinians on the ground in Gaza, meanwhile, confirmed to reporters that the Israeli military has been alerting civilians before airstrikes in an attempt to limit civilian casualties. I've got friends on both sides of this from the standpoint of I don't know a ton of Palestinians, but Lebanese for sure. You bet, for sure. Israeli, Jewish folks, I've got a ton of those folks in my network, people that I know, friends. I've got neighbors that are Israeli. It's just, Seattle and Bellevue are a melting pot of humanity. And so, go to the gas station. Yeah, you bet. I mean, there's some folks there that have strong Lebanese ties. So this event to me is just like, all right, this whole terrorist strike by Hamas. I mean, I think everybody should be able to agree. That's a hard no-go. And here's one of those folks that spoke out. On Sunday, former NBA star Amar'e Stoudemire blasted the larger Black Lives Matter movement and its supporters for its failure to condemn the atrocities committed against Israel over the weekend. Here's a video of Amar'e Stoudemire. If you don't know who that is, he is now an NBA coach, I believe, and he was an amazing player back in the day. So he's an NBA basketball guy.
Out of Israel, the Hamas kidnapping children, putting them in cages, killing women, killing the elderly. That's some coward. That's cowardly. And for all y'all Black Lives Matter who ain't saying nothing, well, let me figure out exactly what happened before I say anything. You. Figure out what? It ain't never been cool to kidnap kids and put them in cages. It ain't never been cool to kill women and elderly. Never been. No matter where you from, what you represent, what tribe you from, it don't matter. There ain't never been no cool. There ain't never been none that nobody supported. And then you go and hide and put the kids in front of you as a barricade. That's some coward. All you politicians who always had something to say on the contrary, I see you. You. All you Black Lives Matter people who always had something to say and always supported everything else, and you quiet now, you too. Only place in the world where I can go and study Torah and eat kosher food. Only place in the world. Some coward. And all y'all supported, you. On my mama, we don't respect none of y'all for that. Peace.
Amar'e Stoudemire. Those are his thoughts. And full disclosure, Amar'e Stoudemire is both an Israeli and United States citizen. So he's got, I believe one of his parents, his mom, is from Israel. So that's the connection there. I mean, you hear it right from him. I don't think he could be any clearer, right? I mean, that was pretty crystal clear, especially in regards to the atrocities we saw and Black Lives Matter's response to it. Here is the feed on Instagram for Black Lives Matter LA. Yeah, there's that image. Black Lives Matter grassroots statement in solidarity with the Palestinian people. Not a good look, folks. Not a good look. I'd have to say, yeah. Here's an interesting, and along with that feed, here is a comment that I thought was worthy of reading. So I'm going to read it. I'm an American Jew who has stood side by side with the Black community proclaiming Black Lives Matter. I've marched with you in the streets, attended your protests, donated to your movement, cried over the senseless violence your community faces, and spoken up loudly against dissenting voices, both in person and in online spaces. Why do Jews not count? Why are our lives worth less than any others? Hamas is a terrorist organization. They do not care about freeing Palestine. So many of us in the Jewish community have shown up for you and yours. It is heartbreaking that you don't think the Jewish people deserve the same compassion and humanity. I thought that was very well said. I thought that was very direct. I am not Jewish, right? I'm also not Palestinian. Clearly I'm not Black. So this isn't something that I have a stand on, but what happened with this massacre, I mean, I don't think anybody can sit by and go, that's it. That's okay. I mean, hall pass, it's war. Yeah. No, right? No. Hard no. It's a terrible event. Black Lives Matter Chicago backs Palestine after Hamas terrorist invasion of Israel. Black Lives Matter Chicago publicly asserted its support for Palestine Tuesday in the wake of the terrorist invasion of Israel, sparking outrage in social media. The organization shared a photo to X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. When are we just going to call it X, right? Tuesday of a Palestinian flag tied to a paraglider. I showed you that. The photo bears the words, "I stand with Palestine." That is all that it is it. That is all that is it. That's what Black Lives Matter wrote. I don't understand that. Maybe I'm not meant to. I don't know. Black Lives Matter Chicago expanded on the sentiments in its Facebook account, sharing photos of conversation piecers surrounding the Israel-Hamas war. The conversation piecers are largely in support of Palestine, with one defining terrorist organization, Hamas, as a political party in Gaza who were also kind of started by Israel. Okay. All right. They're a bunch of terrorists, right? And when I experienced Black Lives Matter and I saw what was happening, I went down to Portland and I witnessed Black Lives Matter and Antifa down there. And, you know, they had 100 nights of just roaming around the city, just, you know, lighting things on fire, destroying things, breaking windows, looting stores. That's domestic terrorism, right? And they justified it with, well, these aren't people we're hurting. So, you know, it's all okay. And I was down there. Some of you don't know, if you're tuning in and you've never heard of me or seen me. I was there during the time period where President Trump said, we're going to send the feds in because you guys can't handle your own stuff. You got Black Lives Matter and Antifa just wildly out of control. If you can't get your, you know what, together, then I'm going to send in the feds. I went down there during that time and I witnessed a big chain link fence, the new chain link fence, get destroyed, and Black Lives Matter and Antifa that co-opted these events, you know, try to burn up a federal building. You know, there's a video on that here on this YouTube channel. So, you know, what I saw firsthand was, you know, it wasn't a peaceful protest. Let's put it that way. How about that? How about we just leave it at that, right? And I don't think you can say what happened this past weekend was just a political event, right? Hard no-go. Another falsely claims that the few Israeli hostages taken by Hamas terrorists are to blame for keeping Palestinians hostage in Gaza. We're saying, well, it's justified because of this. I don't think so. At least 150 hostages were taken by Hamas in its invasion of Israel. Many of them, including those attending a music festival, have no link to land disputes between Palestinians and Israelis. There were some Israeli kids, you know, close to the Gaza border, and they were doing a dance, you know, a trance festival. You know, staying up all night and not wake up, but, you know, in the morning they're dancing as the sun comes up. I mean, some pretty epic stuff. And then the hang gliders start coming in and then it just goes wildly sideways. I mean, wildly sideways. If you followed the stories of how that looked, I mean, the last moments of many of those women were just filled with, I mean, some unbelievable atrocity. Yeah. Hardcore. I literally can't imagine. Just higher education isn't a pickle to everyone, and we want to make sure everyone can understand what is happening. The organization wrote on Facebook. And then we get to this Facebook post is no longer available, and it may have been removed. But the privacy settings of the post may have changed. The remarks have drawn the ire of social media users, with some comparing the paraglider depicted in the X photo to those used by Hamas terrorists to attack on Israeli music festival Saturday. I mean, this is clearly, that's what it is. That's what it is. It just is. Yeah, there are some references to what's going on in Chicago. You've got some crazy stuff going on in Chicago. Chicago's a sanctuary city, and so you've got all of these illegal immigrants that have been shipped there. And so now there's this big struggle with resources, which Chicago doesn't have basically enough to support its own folks. And you got winter coming. So you've got just some wild stuff going on. Ex-owner Elon Musk also weighed in on Twitter, replying, "Your position is clear. to Black Lives Matter Chicago's X account. I thought that was a pretty simple and clear. Your position is clear. I mean, you're condoning what happened. The atrocities that happened. You're condoning that. Ugh. Other Black Lives Matter groups have expressed similar stances to that of Chicago. Black Lives Matter Grassroots shared a statement Monday on the clear parallels between Black and Palestinian people. Okay, and that has been documented. Other groups that are on board with the Palestinian version here, the ACLU is taking that stance. A lot of the far left are taking that stance. Because they believe that this is, part of apartheid and, liberating Palestine. And this is something that goes towards this invasion, this massacre goes towards, those political goals. So the national desk reached out to Black Lives Matter Chicago for comment, but did not immediately receive a response. The story will be updated if a response is received. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and there we've got that image, that's a mistake. You put that up, you're asking for it. That is just a mistake to post that. So some of my thoughts is there's a lot of virtue signaling white people out there. I mean, that donated $90 million to Black Lives Matter. And I think had they been there with me at either Chop Chaz, or had they been there boots on the ground down in Portland, where I was as well, you wouldn't have had the support for Black Lives Matter, because you would basically say, this is an out of control group. What are we doing here? This doesn't have a basis in civil society. And part of that is Black Lives Matter believes in the abolition of the police, not defund the police, but get rid of the police, because they believe that money should be appropriated to other, social services and things. So you've got, abolish the police, abolish the court system. I want to get rid of the court system entirely. Abolish ICE. Get rid of ICE and get rid of border policy. Get rid of that. Get rid of prisons. Get rid of the judicial system. At one time they'd said, we don't really believe in the nuclear family. That's been backed off. And then you've got these factions of Black Lives Matter. You got grassroots, and then you've got global, and, they're infighting, and there's money, and there's a $10 million lawsuit. And then there's a content creator house that there's been all kinds of, it's going to be a safe home, but then it's also going to be a content creation home. You've got all this stuff going on that doesn't really point to a stable organization. And then they come out with stuff like this. But the virtue signaling white people, or virtue signaling people in general, but I know so many of them here in Seattle, had they seen the actual incidents that happened, had they been on the ground as, towns were literally burned and looted after the whole George Floyd deal, probably wouldn't have as much backing, because you'd realize, okay, and now you've got, this is what they believe in. This is the direction they're going. And I don't think I'm not shocked. I think I am shocked from the standpoint of, you put I'm still looking at here on my screen. You put the dude with the Palestinian flag on top of a hang glider coming in, or a parachute coming in. Really? You didn't think there was going to be just a scooch of pushback for that? I mean, that's a terrible look. It's a terrible look. But this is what they believe in. This is what they support. So if you're one of those folks that donated or, put the Black Lives Matter sign up, I think there's a lot of people that just don't get it. Because if they did, they'd be so ashamed of having Black Lives Matter, anything, paraphernalia up, right? I mean, there's no other way to state it. I was over in Seattle covering the closings of Target in Seattle. Okay, you've got some criminal activity going on. You got tents galore. You got tents loaded up with drug addicts that are just being enabled by the city. So, what does that look like? Why is Target closing that down? Some of the footage that I shot was of a local church there with a big Black Lives Matter, painted up on the exterior of I think it was a brick building. And it's like, okay, so since when did the teachings of Christ indicate that beheading babies was, something acceptable? Or what happened to those women, or what is happening to them now? What is happening to the hostages now? Because I'm sure that's not going well, right? As I speak, there are atrocities being committed further. So, all this stuff that happened, with the little children, with the elderly, the kids getting put in cage. I mean, just your basic absolute massacre by a terrorist organization that is being supported actively online by who. So if you're a church and you are still flying the Black Lives Matter flag, maybe you want to look at some of this stuff and kind of maybe do your own homework. If you're an organization that is aligning this direction, I would say, maybe put a little bit of thought into that. Maybe take a look at some of this as what's going on and see if that's actually something that you want to support, because that's what you are supporting. And I think the vast majority of viewers on my platform are kind of like, oh, yeah, we were never really on board because we saw the acts of domestic terrorism that we saw in the Summer of Love. And, you can only attribute it to a couple of different groups, right? And so, it's not shocking that these things were posted from my standpoint, but just that they were posted is kind of like, oh, wow, that's nutty. That's nutty that they would go there. But they did, and they're going to have to deal with the fallout, because I'm sure the fallout's going to be pretty great, because this is one of those things where I think the vast majority of people, whether you align yourself with the Palestinian side, maybe you're from Iran, you're from Lebanon, whatever, or you go hey, I'm Jewish, I'm from Israel. Any which way you look at those, the invasion that we saw here, the massacre that we saw here, if you have any ounce of dignity as a human being, I don't think you're on board with what happened. So celebrating this with an image of, paratrooper coming down, hard no-go on my part. So, all right, that's it for me. That's all I've got on this one. And this is definitely a developing story. I'll keep you updated. Thanks so much for being here. We'll catch up on the next one. Bye for now.